The Fat Controller stood on the balcony, lit in the pure red of the smelter's shed. He looked down, tired but relieved to see a very petrified Stepney still in one piece. "It's a good thing I've chosen to visit this yard tonight," he called. "Saving you from scrap is getting to be a habit, Stepney. Please stop it." "Yes, sir, but I have learnt something." "What's that?" "There's no place like home," declared Stepney, "and that's exactly where you're going now." Stepney's crew soon joined their engine and climbed into his cab. One more thing," the Fat Controller added. "How did you get in here in the first place? Your driver said you were left outside." Stepney described the two diesels who had captured him in as best detail as he could. The Fat Controller's eyes narrowed. "I see. Thank you, Stepney. I'll see to this at once." Later, after Stepney had left for home, the Fat Controller spoke with the foreman. He had visited the scrapyard that night to discuss business in transporting and disposing of old machinery from his railway. He got more than what he intended. "That is simply preposterous," scoffed the foreman. "Stepney was very specific. 2 diesel shunters emerged from behind him and pushed him into the smelter shed. I don't have any diesel shunters like that here. You know that." The Fat Controller pondered. He knew a few of the shunters here, and they seemed friendly. But he also considered that the scrapyard was its own company, and not under his control. He had no authority, or truthfully, no full knowledge over who worked here. "Well," he continued, "whoever or whatever you have here, I advise you to keep them in check. An engine was nearly lost tonight." He trailed off, observing the tall long piles of rusted empty shells that were once engines. "If you don't have any sense of control over your engines, then I will look elsewhere." "Oh, I understand, sir," sighed the foreman. The two men then began discussing what they were there for in the first place, and after a while an agreement was made. The Fat Controller drove home. Tonight's events never left him. He was never comfortable being in the scrapyard, but this night it felt worse than ever. "I don't know," he thought. "That place, it just feels unnatural." The next morning came, and Gordon pulled into the big station near the other end of the line. It was also the junction for Stepney's branch line, and sure enough, Gordon found the Bluebell engine sitting at the platform. "Good morning, Stepney," he whistled. "Oh, morning," came the meek reply. Word had already gotten round about last night's events, so Gordon wasn't too surprised at the response. "Well, it's good to see you still in one piece. We were all very concerned." "Thanks, Gordon. I'm feeling better if you're wondering. Still, I just didn't expect such a place to be here on this island." "Huh! You're far from the first to think that," grunted Gordon. "I know the Fat Controller doesn't own it. You'd think he'd ensure that we keep out of it as much as possible." "I'm sure it's not his fault," replied Stepney. "As far as I know, it was just a mishap with the points." Still, he paused. It felt too familiar, seeing all those rusted engines, and those grubby diesels eagerly awaiting for us to be gone. The ones I saw last night were exactly the same ones I saw years ago, just before Rusty rescued me. Truthfully, Gordon, I think that's enough of the outside world for me." Gordon completely understood. "Maybe we should arrange for you to work at the big station again," he smiled. "Perhaps being surrounded by more friendly company will cheer you up." Stepney managed a small smile in return. That would be lovely. Just then, the guard blew his whistle. Gordon tooted a friendly goodbye and was on his way. The day dragged on, and by evening Gordon backed into the sheds with the other engines. He had a good day, but a tiring one as well. Unfortunately, he had no chance for a proper rest. Henry was groaning dreadfully. He had taken bad coal and had been feeling stuffy all day. And now he was worse than ever. Oh bother this dreadful coal, he wheezed. I think I might sneeze any moment. Don't even think about it, Henry, snapped James. I've just had my polish and haven't looked so splendid in days. I am not having you ruin that. Gordon sighed and was about to barge in to shut them up when he saw the Fat Controller walk up to him. Good evening, Gordon, he said. I apologise for interrupting your rest, but I'm afraid I have another job for you tonight. The yard has been cleaning out all of its old machines and equipment. It's all in a train ready for the scrapyard, and I wanted Henry to take it. He then turned to the green engine. Lo, you can see why I had to change the arrangements. Well, I can see why Henry can't go, puffed Gordon. But why not James? That's the kind of work he was drawn up for. The train is simply too heavy for him. You're the strongest engine available, answered the Fat Controller sternly. I know you don't like trucks, Gordon, but I also know you can perform such a task very well and without delay. Gordon accepted defeat. Oh, very well, sir, he said at last. Good, smiled the Fat Controller. Please leave for the train now, and take care of the scrapyard. He slowly walked away. Gordon was a little surprised by the Fat Controller's last few words, but when he remembered it would be the same scrapyard Stepney ended up in, it made all the more sense. Well, well, chortled James. Poor old Gordon. You can never get away from dirty trucks, can you? Well, all that shows, little James, retorted Gordon, is that the Fat Controller doesn't deem you strong enough. Truthfully, I don't know how he didn't realise that sooner. Gordon then trailed off, as Henry began groaning louder than usual. Suddenly, he let out an almighty sneeze. A large black stream shot out of his funnel, and within seconds the engines and shed were coated in filthy soot and ashes. Gordon had begun moving at this point, setting off for the yards. Even though he was sure he was out of earshot, he swears he could hear James's furious rant from miles away. By the time Gordon was out on the main line, night had fallen and the moon shone above him. The trucks creaked and rattled behind him as he trundled along to his grim destination. It will be alright, Gordon, soothed his driver. We'll be in and out like we were never there. We can give you a good clean-up tomorrow. Gordon said nothing. He thought back to his conversation with Stepney, when he briefly touched on his past before being rescued. It made him think back to his own past, back when he just came out of the works. Young and green he was back then, and was a very unique engine from the rest. He had siblings, of course, but he was given special treatment, features and looks that were not present in the rest of his class. He was the only one to be given such treatment. At least, he was sure he was. Those early memories were fuzzy, and the images in his smokebox were very unfocused. No matter, he said to himself. No need to dwell on what is far behind me. Just got to look forward. It was well that he did look forward, for he realised he was approaching the entrance to the scrapyard. His driver reduced his speed, and the big engine glided through, passing dark tall buildings and messy piles of scrap. Eventually, they came to a stop next to a platform, where the foreman was waiting. "Good to see you here on time," he grunted. "All the shunters are off duty right now, so I'll need you to leave the train in the smelter's shed. Then you can be on your way." "Don't have to tell us twice," muttered the driver. Feeling quite nervous, Gordon moved forward and cautiously proceeded into the red light of the shed. Although far tidier than outside, the smelter's shed felt even more intimidating. Gordon came to a stop with all the trucks inside. Although there was a gentle rumbling of machinery, all felt very quiet. Gordon's fireman had only just uncoupled the train when there was a loud thud from behind. Everyone looked back to find that the large shed doors had slammed shut. "Oh, you cannot be serious," cried Gordon. He would never admit it, but by this point, he was feeling very scared. His crew were on the edge as well. "What do the people here think they're playing at?" snapped the driver. "They're trying to trap us in or something?" "Whatever the problem is," stuttered the fireman, let's try to get it sorted quickly." Everyone was in agreement there. The driver, fireman, and guard all walked off to find the foreman, or anyone, to get the doors open. Gordon could hear their footsteps getting quieter and quieter, until they were gone. The big engine was now all alone, but he didn't feel like it one bit. The machines outside continued whirling, and strange shapes darted in the red mist. It was an environment Gordon had never been in before. "Oh my," he thought to himself. "No engine deserves to witness this. No wonder Stepney got so shaken." All of a sudden, there was an unusual sound in the air. Creaking, squeaking, rattling, and groaning. Then, through the mist, a shape began emerging on Gordon's line. It stood in front of him, and seemed to be static. It was impossible to make out what it was, but it was dark and big. "Who's there?" Gordon called. No answer. The shape became clearer. It appeared to be an engine of some kind. Gordon could just make out the round front of the smoke box, with a little funnel above. "Who are you?" he called again. "What are you doing here?" Again, no answer. Gordon's anxiety was slowly being replaced with frustration. "Well," he snapped, "are you going to say anything? Or are you going to just stand there like some creepy—" Suddenly, the engine surged forward, and in an instant stood a few inches from Gordon's buffers. "Whoosh!" he shrieked. "Get away!" With a better look at his company, he gasped. The engine lacked a face. Only a dark hollow smoke box glared at him. But that wasn't all. It was covered, from its buffer beam to its tender, in rust. The boiler was dented, and the side rods were torn. "What devilry is this?" exclaimed Gordon. Although there was no face, he felt a cold, hard stare. But there was something else that unsettled him. He looked over the engine several times, observing the main body, wheels, and tender. It all looked familiar. Finally, he understood why, and it completely horrified him. The engine looked exactly like him. The same large boiler, the same set of wheels, the same tender. It was as if he was staring into a rusted reflection. In that moment, as he continued to quiver, long-forgotten memories came back to him. They weren't entirely clear, but he instantly recognized them. They were from long ago, shortly after he was built. He was fresh from the works, in a sparkling coat of green paint. He was excited and eager to please his superiors. Before setting off for his first train, Gordon distinctly remembered spotting something in the darkest corner of the workshop. Another engine, facing the wall, completely still and silent. No one seemed to give any attention to it. In fact, there wasn't a single person near it. Gordon tried to picture exactly what that engine looked like, but it was no good. It was a complete blur. Gordon came out of his thoughts and gazed back into the smoke box of the rusted engine. He didn't know what to do. He was trapped inside this dreaded smelting shed, and this thing was just standing there, not making a single move. Was it just biding time? Or was it trying to communicate something to him? He tried to think of anything to say, and eventually, only one response came to his mind. "What are you?" he slowly whispered. There was silence. Then, although he wasn't sure, Gordon thought he heard a voice ringing through his own smoke box. Whatever it was seemed to be an answer to his question. Gordon heard it, and his eyes widened. There was a loud clanking sound, and Gordon looked back to see 3 figures walking towards him as the shed slowly opened up. It was his driver, fireman, and the guard. "You alright, Gordon?" called the driver. "Sorry we took a while." Gordon turned back, and all that was in front of him was a short stretch of line. That twisted scrap engine was gone. No trace was left behind, as if it was never there to begin with. "That bloody foreman thought we were messing with him. Kept insisting the doors were in good order. We would have been back sooner if he just..." The driver stopped as he looked up at the disturbed look on his engine's face. "Gordon? You okay, old boy?" Gordon stuttered. "Oh, yes, of course. Sorry, just feeling uncomfortable is all. Nasty environment and all that." His driver wasn't entirely convinced. He didn't think just sitting in a shed would be that impactful. However, he was too tired to press the issue. "Alright, Gordon, if you say so. Come on then, let's pick up the brake van and be on our way." To Gordon, that was the best thing he heard all night. And so, with the brake van and guard in tow, Gordon set off back home, happy to leave the scrapyard far behind. The next day, life went back to normal for Gordon. He was pulling the express and coasting down the main line, but he was much quieter than usual. He soon met Stepney again, and felt he should at least be open with him on last night's events. The Bluebell engine listened intently. "So, you saw no diesels?" he finally asked. "Not a single one," replied Gordon. "Foreman said they were all off duty." "And this engine you saw, do you know who it was?" "I don't, Stepney. I simply don't. All I know is, I am never setting Will in that place again. The guard's whistle sounded, and the big engine puffed sadly away. The days went by, and eventually, Gordon opened up to the other engines as well. All were disturbed, and all felt sorry for their friend. With each engine, they would always ask the same question. Who was the engine? Gordon is quite positive that he has no idea. The engine's identity is a mystery that he will never solve. I wonder if Gordon's telling the truth. Don't you?